A Libby asbestos exposure case went before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in Portland, Oregon today. It's a case that could affect hundreds of pending Montana lawsuits. Last year, two families were awarded $4 million each in Montana District Court after losing loved ones to mesothelioma linked to asbestos exposure in Libby. They say the victims were harmed specifically from dust that piled up at the BNSF rail yard. The rail company appealed that judgment, which just had its day in court. This case is the first and only to go to trial since a 2020 ruling from the Montana Supreme Court. The ruling found BNSF strictly liable for the way it handled Libby asbestos, but gave an exception for their transportation of vermiculite. Common carriers like railways are subject to federal transportation rules, but can be exempt from state laws because they have to move goods, sometimes even harmful goods, across state lines. Last year, a Montana federal court and jury decided BNSF was liable and the exception did not apply. The court today, though, heard BNSF's appeal. They argued the railroad only transported vermiculite in Libby, so it should be protected under both Montana's common carrier exception and under federal transportation laws, which they argue preempt state law. The plaintiffs, though, claim BNSF did not only transport vermiculite, they also argued that BNSF allowed toxins to pile up for decades in their rail yard, which they say was not a part of their protected transportation mission. The plaintiffs are asking the Ninth Circuit Court to put the case before the Montana Supreme Court. BNSF is asking them to reverse the district court's $8 million judgment. The case before the court today involves the estates of Tom Wells and Joyce Walder. Both died in 2020 of mesothelioma. Joyce grew up in Libby, while Tom spent summers working in the Yak while going to college. He lived near the rail yard at that time. Both died within months of being diagnosed. We spoke with one of Tom's sons today who tells me their dad was very active. In fact, recently climbed Mount Baker before he got sick. He was a runner, an angler, and a dad described as a best friend. Jack Wells told me his dad started the legal journey before he died. He feels it's their obligation to see this through.
I think he felt like he got a lot of good years taken away from him, and he also knew that it could potentially help out a lot of other people in the Libby community. So we feel like it's a valuable process to see out. We realize that, you know, if this case gets a good outcome, then it's going to be very favorable for a lot of other people in Libby that have similar situations.
I also spoke to Joyce Walder's sister, Judith, who told me Joyce was a master sergeant in the Air Force Reserves and served in Operation Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom. They had plans to travel together in their retirement. Joyce died at the age of 66. It's taken years, in fact, almost a century to reach this point. Vermiculite mining started in the 1920s in Libby. 4 decades later, in 1963, W.R. Grace bought the mine and would operate it until its closure in 1990. Investigations into public concern over exposure to asbestos would only start years later, in 1999. By 2000, the EPA began removal actions at the site. By 2002, the Libby mine was added to the Superfund program. But the first public health emergency for Libby was declared in 2009, almost 30 years after the mine closed. And just over a decade later, the Wells and Walder families would file their suit. In the interest of full transparency, MTN News reporter Sean Wells is a plaintiff in this federal court case. Wells recused himself from all asbestos-related and Libby News coverage in 2021 when he became involved in the litigation. This decision reflects MTN News and Scripps' commitment to maintaining journalistic integrity and providing fair, balanced coverage for our viewers. The station makes editorial decisions like this to ensure our reporting remains objective and free from potential conflicts of interest.